Welcome to the Inside Scoop, your one-stop shop for cracking the leadership code. Have you ever wondered what those conversations are like in the boardroom? Curious about the secret sauce successful executives possess? On the Inside Scoop podcast, we sit down with successful executives, getting their unique perspective on what it takes to be a good leader. They'll share their hard-won wisdom, the crucial competencies needed to thrive as a leader, and the unexpected lessons learned along the way. Here, we unlock the secrets of the executive suite. We get the inside track directly from the leaders themselves. In each episode, we'll dissect the essential skills needed to go from manager to leader, offering a leader's perspective on the challenges, triumphs, and unexpected wisdom they've acquired. The Inside Scoop, leadership lessons, served fresh.
Glad you joined us. Welcome to this episode of the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Eduardo Bryant, and I'm telling you, we have put together an outstanding show for you today. So wherever you get your podcast, whether you do YouTube or Spotify or you do Apple Podcasts, this podcast is available. So today, I'm going to make sure I get the title right. So I'm going to look at my paper here. We're going to talk about hard truths about sales leadership. Now, when you think about that title, what's a hard truth? It all dovetails into what leadership really should be. Our guest is none other than Mike Mulfelder, and he is going to bring into the mix all of his years of expertise from being a vice president of sales, from being a chief revenue officer, even to being a founder. This guy has not only insight, but he's got wisdom. And the way he delivers the story, if you're driving, hold on to the steering wheel because it is coming. So without any further ado, and also, if you hear something that you like and you enjoy it, we ask you to subscribe and become part of our viewership. So without any further ado, let's bring in Mike. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That's maybe the greatest introduction I've ever had. Like, yay.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's deserving so. I've had a chance to talk to you a bit and we've corresponded. So I already know the passion and what you bring. But more than that, I'm already aware the audience is about to find out what it is that you can really bring that makes a difference. It's a mind shift, if you will. And I think you can deliver that. But before we begin, one of the questions I ask all of the guests is, what are they reading? And I think that's important because a person like yourself at that C-suite spot, certainly you're doing things to keep yourself on top of your game. So share with the audience, Mike, what are you reading right now?
So I'm reading 2 books right now. So I am a longtime believer that leaders are readers. So one book that is almost a constant companion, and I think my 3rd or 4th at least time through is Gap Selling by Keenan. And the other is and I've known Keenan for 12 years, I think it is. And the other is called Authentic Selling by another Boston guy who I've known for a few years named Jeff Kurchik. It's wonderful book. So those are the 2 that I'm reading right now.
They both sound good. Yeah. So, all right. Thank you for the recommendation. I'm sure there's a lot of leaders out there that'll be hearing that and going, I haven't read that one. So good for you. And in addition to that, so as we dive into it, we think about leaderships and we think about what it is to be a leader. And you have climbed several corporate ladders within your career, working for big companies. And you also shared you've worked for small companies. So taking it and putting it all together, how did you get to where you are? What's been your secret sauce? What's been your strategy and how you've gotten there? So tell us, how did Mike get to where he is?
So strategy is an important word. So years ago, I was given advice to manage my career, and not the other way around. I think a lot of folks that I've encountered haven't been as intentional about their career as I was for many years. Meaning, each job that I took thinking towards the next job. What's my next job? And if the job in front of me wasn't going to get me to that next level, then I had to question why I was doing it. And it wasn't about title. Like I didn't chase title. I did that once, regretfully. It was what will I learn? What value can I get? What value can I give? Because I want to keep improving. I want to keep getting, further along in my career. And that's really been a big part of it. And like I said, there was regretfully, I wanted to be a VP of sales. I worked 20 years to become a VP of sales. Finally got to that job, and I hated it. I mean, I can't even put into words how like the first opportunity that I had to jump out, I did, and I was honestly depressed. I was like, I just spent 20 years getting to this level, and now what? So fortunately, I met a wonderful recruiter in the Boston area who said, he asked me what I wanted to do for a job, and I gave him an answer. He said, well, what won't you do? What don't you want? And I couldn't answer the question. I've given this advice to more people than I can ever count. He said, I can't help you until you have the three things that you absolutely want in your next job and the three things that you absolutely will not do. And it took a while. My memory is probably flawed because it's a long time now, but I want to say it took probably close to 6 weeks to really identify the three things that I did not want. So fast forward to the opportunity that came my way, and I knew the company. As soon as the recruiter called me and was describing the job, I was like, I knew exactly who it was. I knew I wanted to work for them. It was a step down from VP to a director. But one of the things that I made a decision was I didn't want to be a VP of sales again. And when I sat down with the CEO, first thing I said to him was, Ken, you need to know these are the three things that I do not want in a job. I'm not going to do it. I can still tell you what the three things were. This is 2007. It was, I don't want to go to an office every day. I don't want to work 80 hours a week, and I don't want to be a VP of sales. I don't want the job. I don't want the responsibility. And he smiled and he said, well, unless you're at corporate headquarters in California, everybody's remote. So you don't have to, there's no office to go to. He said, if you're working 80 hours a week for me, you're doing something wrong. And I just hired a VP of sales. I don't need a VP of sales. That VP of sales, by the way, turned out to be a wonderful guy that I knew from back when I worked at Siebel. He was like one of the top reps in the world. We became friends. I worked for him for 5 years afterwards. So when he left, I became the VP of sales. It was a different experience, but I had narrowed down what I wanted, and that's been the pattern that I've followed over and over and over again in my careers. What at this stage, what do I want? What won't I do?
That's a good answer of how you got to where you are. I want to dive into that, not wanting to be a VP of sales. And I'll tell you why. There's a lot of people right now listening even to this podcast that happen to be a VP of sales. And there are a lot of people who are at that director level with the aspirations of becoming a VP of sales. So please elucidate, share with us, why did you hate that role and not want to go back into it again?
So, and I want to be careful because I'm, the people are still on the planet, so I don't want to implicate too much. So I accept responsibility for these things, right? I thought I had asked all the questions and I hadn't. I joined the company. First day that I was there, I got my first, I actually was hired not as the VP of sales, but as different VP title. I got my first forecast and I was trying to figure it out. It didn't make any sense. So I called the VP of sales who sat on the other side of the office and said, hey, I don't understand the forecast. He said, oh, come on over and let's talk. So I sat down and I said, is this in tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands? He said, oh, it's in thousands. I said, it can't be in thousands because you have enterprise reps chasing $1,700 deals. And he said, no, that's right. He said, sometimes they even get on planes and they do that. I said, no. So that was like the first sign that something was wrong and it was very different than what I had been told. So fast forward about another month, all of a sudden that VP of sales retires, and they have me running sales. I end up reorganizing the sales team, rebuilt it successfully, fortunately. but the CEO made a decision to bring in a different VP of sales 9 months into the job after the turnaround. And so part of it, in hindsight, part of it was ego. Like, why are you pushing me out? And part of it was just like, this is not at all what I want or what I want to be doing. Like I wasn't being authentic to the things that I wanted for myself at that point in my life. Was really what it came down to. And I didn't enjoy the responsibility of running the sales organization when there was so much other dysfunction happening with people around me. And so I said, I don't want that anymore. I don't want to have to, I don't want to have the target on my back and not be able to, and still be affected by change instead of affecting change.
It's interesting to hear you say some of that, because when we think about the hard truths about sales leadership, that role of VP of sales, and I have conversations all the time. I mean, I literally am on the phone or in person talking to people who hold that very title or some version of that title. And these conversations go something like, well, we need to do this, but I can't get it done. What my sales team really needs is X, Y, Z. And it just seems so organic to say, well, why don't you go do that? Why don't you go and make that? Why don't you make that change? Why don't you start implementing that? And of course, there's like the ceiling, there's like all of the roadblocks that keep those things from getting done. So a vice president of sales, where they've got a lot of autonomy and responsibility, sometimes big decisions are made above their head.
Right.
So they actually don't get a chance to implement what needs to be done. And then the person who does have that have the authority to make that decision, sometimes doesn't allow those changes to happen. So it's almost like this, almost like a cycle that the sales team stays in because they can't seem to get things done.
Yeah, it's a great point, Eduardo, and I believe it's gotten far worse in the last 3 to 5 years, and it's again, it's my opinion, right? The world according to Mike Mohlfelder. People are going to agree or disagree. There's this fear-based culture that has crept into corporate. I want to say corporate America, but I've worked globally, so I know that it is a global issue. And it's the fear is bi-directional. I have at the top, I have a fear of asking hard questions because I don't want the answers. I'm afraid of what the answers might be, especially as it relates to sales. And if I'm the VP or director, or even the salesperson, I'm afraid to answer the hard questions because I'm afraid of getting fired. And if you're in a role where you've been making, depending upon the industry you're in, as a VP of sales, anywhere from $150,000 to $1 million a year, that's a lot of fear if you suddenly have to replace that income. So it creates. I took a course earlier this year through Pavilion Network, a CRO school, and one of the Outward Performance for Leaders, and one of the things we talked about was collusions. So we create these collusions instead of being honest about, hey, we're not closing these deals. We're not going to hit our number. We're not structured properly. We're not like. I as a VP, I don't want to go to the CRO or the CEO and say, hey, this is really messed up. We got to fix this. We're not getting better.
So
yeah,
let's talk a little bit about the guy at the bottom, the sales rep. Because when we think about leadership, it all comes from top down. But where does it hit? Right on the bottom, which is where the people that I call them the soldiers, foot soldiers. They're the ones on the ground. They're the ones that's making it work. They're making the phone calls. They're actually making the visits to their customers. They're the ones having constant dialogue. They're fixing problems. They're trying to push deals across the finish line. They're looking at resources in the pipeline. They're really trying to make sure that the company stays afloat. I mean, it's one of the hardest positions within a company is to be the guy or girl on the ground effectuating what needs to be done. So let's talk a little bit about them. What do they need? Not the resource just in terms of the widget, but what is it that they need from their managers or even upper management in order for them to be effective to do their job. You know, that hard conversation that we need to have with the people up top. What is it that they need?
So keep in mind, I carried a bag for 15 years. I was an individual contributor for 15 years. I've been in sales leadership for 20. And in that 20 years that I've been in sales leadership, I have stayed on the front lines. I'm not going to lead from the back of the pack. It's not fair to do that to the team. What salespeople need is, first off, they need a coach. They don't need a manager. They need a coach. And, you know, we love, in sales, we love our sports analogies. And this is the biggest one. In any sport, I don't care what it is, you have coaches. In golf, you have a swing coach, you have a putting coach, right? You don't just show up at a tournament and play 18 holes. If it's baseball as your sport, if you're a pitcher, you've got somebody watching every move that you make. Are you tipping? Are you putting your left foot forward? Are you tipping your glove? All of this stuff matters. And if your sales manager isn't in your deals with you and coaching you and giving you help and advice, not punishing, it's very difficult to get better. And then what happens is we propagate, I'll call them myths, up the pipeline until the forecast is completely wrong. Because the sales rep, through no fault of their own, hasn't even been properly trained on how to qualify a deal. It's one of the first things I do with the team now. This is how we qualify deals. We're not using BANT, we're not using anim. Please, oh my gosh, if you're using that and you're listening, stop today. Do not use BANT or anim to qualify a deal. Doesn't qualify it. We don't use MEDDIC to qualify deals. MEDDIC is for your sales process. But the first thing that we do is we understand, what does good look like? And from there, we can say, okay, now that I know that I have a qualified opportunity, we do discovery. This is where gap selling comes into play. We do discovery to understand, is there a financial component to this strong enough? I don't care what you're selling. Is the financial component strong enough to compel them to action? Can I add value here? Can I be successful? If the answer to that is yes, now I can move on to demos, proposals, references, all the other stuff that happens in sales. But the job of the sales leader is to be watching this, because otherwise what happens is I get to a forecast. The forecast is wrong. I, as the VP of sales, am getting pressure from the CFO, the CRO, the investors on the forecast, and I'm pushing that pressure down onto the sales rep. And the sales rep, some will panic, honestly, right? But too often what happens is we destroy their psyche, which it's not fair. You know, and then what happens is they leave. And I have a newfound empathy for the sales reps who are leaving after 14 or 18 months, right? It used to be like you get a resume or look at LinkedIn, it's like 14 months, 14 months, 16 months, 18 months. You're like, I'm not even going to talk to this person. And what I've learned is that more often than not, the reason, now some of this, by the way, is on the rep. Okay, so I'll come back to that. But more often than not, what's happening is they're getting to a place, and it takes about a year to get to it, where they realize, I can't make my number here. And worse, I can't make my number here, and they're going to put me on a plan, or they're going to fire me. So I'm going to quit, go get another job before they fire me. Now, that's really wrong. That just shouldn't happen. That goes back to coaching. But it is on the rep to read, to learn, to like all of the information that we need to be great salespeople, to be great at just about anything. Please don't learn to be a do-it-yourself surgeon, but just about everything that you need to learn is available online. If you want to be a great salesperson, you don't have to listen to me. It's all out there on YouTube and There's plenty of books and plenty of TED Talks and everything you can read to learn that.
So you bring up a bunch of great points there. I like that part you talked about when you said sales reps need a coach. I want to move up the ladder a bit.
Okay.
So that's the sales reps. And I agree with you, by the way, that they definitely need a coach because it's the coach that really helps them. We call it a partnership.
Mhm.
But the coach themselves. So let's talk a little bit about that first line manager. You've got your coach as the first line manager. There are certain skills, competencies that that person needs in order for them to help you. We can easily say you need to be a coach, but not everybody knows how to coach.
Mhm.
Just because that's what they should do doesn't mean that they know how to. Communication, for example, if you think about how they do that, a level of empathy, where does that come into play? Can they truly inspire you to be the best you possible? That's a part of the whole coaching. So when we think about that first line manager, as we move up this chain from sales rep to the first line manager, we'll go up to the VP level next. But right in that cushion sweet spot,
Mhm.
what is it that needs to be the hard conversation to that manager who happens to be a regional manager, a district manager, whatever title they've got, but they've got the direct connection with the reps because those are their direct reports.
You have to be able, you have to be able to be empathetic. You have to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the rep. And by the way, this is one of the things I tell every single team when I've started, my job is to be as unemotionally involved in your deal as I can possibly be. The further up the chain you go from the deal, the less emotion there needs to be. Because the rep needs to be emotionally involved in their deal. They have to care about it, obviously. The manager has to be the first person to say, Eduardo, you went right past the sign, you missed it. Or I'm seeing things that are not, I don't think this is a winnable deal. I know you think it's a winnable deal, but here's why I don't think it is. And to be able to say that to a rep in a way that's not going to send them into the pit of despair and have them go, okay, well, let's talk. Well, what needs to happen? Or maybe the reality is, yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way. Yeah, this is not a winnable deal. I guess I got to pull the ripcord and get out of here. Now, this that also becomes a leadership issue in terms of who's that first line manager, who's the VP, and I don't see it as much now. I think companies have figured it out. The top rep is generally a terrible manager. Not always, right? So I don't want to be coming at me on LinkedIn and like threatening me and like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Yes, there are people who are great sales reps who become great leaders. More often than not, that's not the case. It's very similar to sports. You don't have a lot of Hall of Famers that are also coaches in any sport because it's usually the team player, the career 230 batter or the backup quarterback who makes the great coach because they see everything that's going on the field. It's just a different way of looking at things. And that's who makes the great manager, leader, etc. is the person who they know how to do the job, but they also know they see the field in a very wide aperture, and they come from experience. So my first step into management was like 1992-ish. Yeah, I am that old. For everybody listening, I'm that old. Oldest guy on every call. I worked for ADP, and they had this quasi role that was a player coach role. So I had a couple of people that were reporting to me. I had part of their quota, but I still had my quota. And when I realized like 6 or 9 months in was like, I don't know enough yet. I haven't been doing this long enough to teach them anything other than like, you have to you got to brush your hair. And I'm not making this up. Like, you got to brush your hair every day. We suit and tie, like wear a press shirt, push your tie all the way up. Don't look like you just came out of the bar at 9 o'clock in the morning. Stuff like that I could teach, but everything else I was like, I didn't know yet. So I walked away. So I don't want to do this. I just want to be an individual contributor. And I didn't come back to a management role for 12 more years. So by the time I came back into a management role, I had been in sales at that point, even not even B2B sales. I had already been in sales for almost 17 years. So I kind of knew at least a little bit about sales by the time I started leading people.
That's a nice kind of a walkthrough of all of that, because when you think about it, that manager's role, and I think you're right when you talk about how just because you were the best salesperson, salesman of the year, President's Club winner, and all of that, yeah, the skills are different. And we all know it. I don't think we all want to accept it because everyone thinks that the way up is to perform fantastic here. Well, yeah, there's some truth in that, but it's not necessarily the best. So I think we all can agree that just because you were number one in this doesn't mean you'll even be successful at the next level up. And it's that next level up that we really want to talk about. So you've got your manager, your district, your regional, your person that's above. They've got the direct reports of the sales reps. Now you've got your vice president. The vice president role is different. And we tell people all the time, it's different managing other managers versus managing an individual contributor. That's a completely different animal. The way you handle that is totally different. And I'd like to get into a little bit about that because what you're talking about is at that first level. Now let's jump up to that next level. Let's look at the delta between how do you talk to a manager? What do you say? Because what you're saying to a manager is a way for them to be a coach to their individual contributor. So that's different.
So when I'm talking to the manager, it's I would say more of an accountability discussion, because now they're responsible for other people's number in order to get to their number, which means they need to be in the deals. They need to be inspecting the deals so that when they give me a number, the number's right. Or, I mean, it's imperfect. Forecasting is an imperfect science, and it's going to be maybe forever, but at least for a very long time. So I want and expect my leaders to be in the business every day. And again, I haven't seen it in a while, so I want to believe that it's happening less frequently. But too often, like that first line manager, it's maybe the toughest job because you're getting pressure like from both sides to perform. But their job is to lead their people literally on a day-to-day basis. It's almost like, and I hope people will pardon the analogy, it's like raising kids. The first line's manager's job is to raise the kids. You can't just put them on the bus in the morning, have them go to school, come home, make their own dinner, and once a week check in. Hey, how was school this week? Hey, did you get your homework done? No, you got to be like every day. And if you can't do it or won't do it every day, then we are going to have a problem, because you're going to end up missing forecast, or you're going to have salespeople quit, or you're going to have all these problems are going to occur, which then become my problem as the VP. And I have a lot of other things that I'm responsible for, so I can't be responsible also for your team. Now, at the same time, as a VP or whatever level you are, you need to, at some point, until you get to a scale where you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, you still need to be involved with your reps. They need to know you they need to know you, you need to know them, because you're going to learn from them what's happening in their deals in the field, what messaging is working, what competitors are doing, all that stuff, and you want it unfiltered. So the first line manager, their job is to basically keep the freaking trains running on time. That's it. And I expect people to be able to do that. And when they need help, to say, I need help. Either because I'm not sure how to do it, or I don't think this is right, or maybe it's a personnel problem. But to come like, don't be ashamed to say, I need help. I had a VP again, I'll obscure names and companies. And he said to me, we were not having a good conversation. And he said, well, the only time I hear from you is when there's a problem. I said, no. I said, you only hear from me when there's a problem because 80% of the time, I've been doing this for many, many years. 80% of the time, I solve the problem all by myself. I don't need your help. When I come to you, it's because I need somebody with your title, your 23 years of experience in the company to go and get something done because I can't do it. I can't affect the change. It's like, oh, I hadn't thought about that.
It's all about communication, isn't it?
And, you know, it is, you know, it's no different at work than it is at home, right? And in our personal lives, everything breaks down really quickly when the communication breaks down. I have been humbled in ways that I will not get into on this podcast because of communication.
You know, I'll even throw in another word, expectation.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about a couple things there where there was an expectation from your boss, especially when the one said, the only time I ever hear from you, Mike, is when there's a problem. If you read between the tea leaves, your boss is telling you, I expect you to talk, communicate, at least check in with me much more often than you do. Your response back was you're solving things on your own. And so you only check in with him when you really need him to exert his authority and his power. But that's not what he's expecting.
Super insight. You're
Yep.
very right. So that was it. You're right. And one of the things that I learned, for me, it's like, I don't hang my head in shame and woe is me. It's like, what did I learn from this? Like, oh, I didn't manage up. And I didn't manage up because he had like a $1.2 billion quota. My quota was $36,000. I was a rounding error. It didn't matter if my team was 200% a plan or 2% a plan. It didn't matter to him. So I didn't want to go to him and say, oh, I have this problem. I was like, he's got way bigger things to worry about than my little problem. So I would only go to him when it's like, this is too big of a problem for me to solve on my own. I need your help.
So what advice would you give a manager who then is listening to this and they're saying, you know, I've got that same scenario where my boss doesn't think I communicate enough with them, or they don't know if that's an issue with their boss. What advice would you say, hey, you need to check in with them, or you need to, I don't know, I would think, ask them, how do you want to be managed?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay.
Ask them. Like, I'm a simple guy. I really am. I'm a guy who barely graduated from high school. I barely got into college. I barely graduated from college. I am not making it up. I can prove it. So I tend to break things down very simply. If you're not sure of what your boss wants from you, ask, what do you want from me? What do you want to meet? Do you want to have a weekly one-on-one with me for a half hour? Do you want a status report every week? Do you want to meet once a month? Do you want to come to my team meetings? Do you want to be invited to my QBRs? Do you want to come to sales calls? Do you only want me to come to you when there's a problem? Do you want me to come to you with good news? Like, find out what it is, document it, write it down, send it to your boss. Eduardo, thanks. I'm really glad that we spent the time together. This is what I'm going to do on a weekly, monthly basis based on the conversation. I'm going to send you a status report every Friday afternoon. I'm going to schedule a monthly one-on-one with you, and I'm going to arrange skip level reviews with my team once a quarter. Now it's done. We've agreed to it. Now, there's a whole nother set of issues if you have a manager, and I know this happens, where you have agreed to it, you've agreed to it in writing, and then they go and do something different. Listen, people are messy. We can't control what other people do. We can only control our own things that we say, the things that we do. We don't even control what we think. That's a whole nother conversation. So control those things, like control what you say and control what you do. And then if other people do something different or change it on you, well, sometimes that's a prerogative, but other times it's like, well, that's what we have to accept.
Great advice, at least. You know, that's really good, because communication becomes a whole animal within there. And you mentioned something earlier when you said manage up. So let's go up the ladder to the next role. You've got your VP here, and now you're going to have either your senior VP or you're going to have your chief commercial officer, your chief operating officer, someone that's got that chief behind title. That person, which you've been, so you've had that role as well. Now, how do they manage the VP who is managing that district or regional manager who has a responsibility, at least direct responsibility to the reps? What does that
So,
role look like? What does
so
that
one,
chief role look like? And what are those types of conversations? And how do they get into the weeds on that? And what's their role?
so now we're really getting into responsibility and accountability. And years ago, I can't believe I'm going to quote a TV show for the point, but I will. So years ago, there was an episode of West Wing where I can't even remember what the president's Bartlett, Martin Sheen played Bartlett, and he said he was in a conversation with the chief of staff, and I can't remember which one of them said it, but it was, when you get to this level, your words carry weight, and you have to be very careful about what you say and what you do. And as you move up the ladder, and certainly once you get to a point where you're an SVP or you're carrying a C-level title, your words matter. What you do, what you say, everybody notices. If you show up at a meeting, at a company meeting, and you're not in a great mood, people will pick up on the fact that you're not in a great mood, and they will make up their own story about why you're not in a great mood. So you have to be very careful. You have to be very intentional in how you communicate. And you have to be very intentional with your VPs down the chain of command. Now, I also feel I believe in chain of command, but I also believe that we are humans, and humans interact with humans, and we don't interact with each other based on on the title. I don't look at someone say, oh, I was like this when I was younger, right? Oh, he's the CEO, so I got to operate a different way. It's like, no, we're like, we all have our own pains and problems and issues with family and good times. So communicate with people on a human to human level, and communicate expectations. When someone does something good, tell them, hey, that was really good. Praise them publicly. When they do something that's not good, let them know what you did, not good, and do it privately. Do not, like, we have Slack. Like, every company's using Slack. Do not put in the group channel when someone does something wrong. At whatever level, definitely not if it's your VP. If you chastise a senior executive in a public forum, you have made their job almost impossible. Because the entire team's like, oh, well, Mike is an idiot. Because Joe said Mike is an idiot. And it may even be that, like, it wasn't even right, or it wasn't even aimed at Mike, but people intimated it. So, like, you got to be very, very careful about what you communicate, and make sure that, like, we make mistakes. We're human. We all make mistakes. And the difference between young Mike, older Mike. When I was younger, it was like, don't make the same mistake twice. And as I've gotten older, it's like, don't make the same mistake 3 times, because, like, we make a mistake, maybe we forget, we make it a second time, or it's not quite the same mistake, but it kind of. And I'll ask, well, what did you learn? And we go forward. The third time it happens, now it gets to either you won't do it differently or you can't do it differently. And I need to figure out very quickly, especially if it's a VP, I need to figure out very, very quickly which of those 2 things it is. Because if you won't do it the way you're being asked to do it, we have a pretty big problem. We have a very big problem, actually. And if you can't do it the way you're being asked to do it, then it's a training issue. We need to fix that. But it comes back to the communication. So having an environment where people can be comfortable with the fact that they can come to you with good news and bad news. I mean, I have a standing joke with my teams, like, I love good news on a Friday afternoon. And every now and then someone will come to me on a Friday afternoon and be like, Mike, I know you like good news on a Friday afternoon, but I got bad news. Like, all right, well, at least you prefaced it and told me, like, here comes the cold water. Like, great, bring it, give it to me. I don't want, like, what I don't want, and this kind of goes to the conversation, like, up and down the stack. Here's what I don't want. If it's bad news, I don't want you to have to carry it for a day or 2 days. Because that, like, imagine if it's a Friday afternoon and you lost a deal and you're like, oh, Mike only likes good news on a Friday, so I'm not going to tell him until Monday. And all weekend long, that's festering. And it's affecting how you sleep. Maybe it's affecting how much you drink. It affects how you're interacting with your significant other. I don't want that. And hopefully anybody listening to this that's in a leadership position doesn't want it either. So strive for that level of communication. And that's, by the way, you asked at the beginning, what am I reading? Authentic Selling, right? You have to be authentic about that. If that's not who you are, then, honestly, you should probably question whether you should be in a leadership position. Not everybody should be in a leadership position. That's fine.
Well, that's clearly true. Not everyone who is in a leadership position should be there. That's a whole different topic for
Isn't it?
It really is. I really like what you just said about, as a leader, I don't want you to have to carry bad news for a day or 2 or 3 days or however long it is. You talked about the weekend. That's a great point. How many times does a leader shelter bad news that comes from up top down to their people? A good manager, a good leader does that. But
Mhm.
likewise, a good leader also doesn't want someone below them who reports to them to have to shoulder bad news. Because as you were just talking about what that does to you, yeah, you carry that weight and it has a deleterious effect on your health. I'm sure you're familiar with the quote that says that your leader or your manager has a greater effect on your mental health than your doctor or your therapist.
Yep.
And imagine the cascade of problems it can cause. So I think that's really good that a leader can say, hey, let me help you with that, no matter where you are, from senior leadership all the way down. So great points, Mike. I mean, you just brought out so much that if
Thank
I
you.
was driving in the car and I'm listening to you and I'm in leadership, I'm thinking about that's me, or we've got that scenario at work, or I'm trying to change that right now, or perhaps I need to get better at this. So these were all great points. And, I want to take a moment to thank you for just taking time out of your busy schedule to come on and to share this. I mean, as I've said it many times, it's not easy to get an appointment with people like you and have this conversation. You and I have gone back and forth for a long time on trying
Yeah,
to
a
get
couple of
this.
years.
Yeah, just trying to get this. So it's not easy. So
Yeah.
it takes time, and you guys are busy and nailing you down. And you look at my schedule, I've got several people booked and they're all counseling for this reason or that. They rebook and reschedule, but I mean, sometimes that even gets canceled. So it's not easy, and I appreciate that.
Well,
Before,
likewise, now I feel badly that I didn't meet you 2 years ago, because I had more fun talking to you and really enjoyed, like, just the camaraderie here. And so thank you for having me on and for talking with me and sharing our point of view here. It's been great.
oh, you're absolutely welcome. Before I let you go, though, I always like to give my guests the last word, a minute or two where maybe there's something you were thinking about that you wanted to say, but you didn't say it. Or maybe there's another nugget that popped into your head that you said, let me add this, or I wish I would have added this. So if you can think of anything that you would like to add to this conversation for the leaders out there who are in their role or aspiring to get to their role, then I'll give you the opportunity to provide any more nuggets as you would wish. The floor is yours, Mike.
Oh, now my wheels are turning and really quickly in a lot of different directions. So first of all, I welcome anybody to connect with me on LinkedIn. I am the only, my claim to fame, if you will, I'm the only Michael Mollfelder in the world. I did find out last year there is a guy in Germany. He still has the umlaut over the U, so I can still claim I'm the only Mike Mollfelder. But there is one other. He's not on LinkedIn now. So I'm the only Michael Mollfelder. I'm easy to find. You can also find me if you Google me. I've been doing this a long time. I love conversations, and I don't need people to agree with me because I learn lots from people who don't agree with me. I think the biggest thing that I would really suggest to people is be open to the possibility that you're wrong. In fact, for me, I don't operate this way all the time, but that is my go-to position. Is that, and I'll say to people, like, someone will ask me my opinion on something, and I'll give them an answer and say, but I could be wrong. Because we're all wrong a lot. And the danger is that we either decide that we're not, or we believe that we're not, and that stops the learning. And not only does it stop the learning, but it stops people from coming to us with information, because, like, oh, Mike's just going to believe that he's right. But if I come to conversations with the belief that I might be wrong, it gives me the opportunity to learn lots of new things from lots of new people. Not some of the greatest things that I've learned about sales did not come from anybody in sales. In fact, one of the greatest things I learned was from my former acupuncturist. He wasn't like not even somebody in business. So be open to that possibility that you're going to learn something from anybody and everybody, and that you may be wrong about whatever it was that you thought you were doing was the right thing to do.
That is a great nugget to end on. Think about it. Be open to the possibility that you could be wrong. It provides the avenue for you to learn something. Mike, thank you so much. This has been great. I'm sure the audience loved it. I truly appreciate having your time and getting you on the podcast. And to everyone that's been listening, thank you so much, listening or watching, because you can certainly watch it on YouTube. Thank you. Thank you for spending a good 45 minutes to an hour with us. Just, hopefully you've taken it all in and you were listening. And again, if you heard and saw something that you really enjoyed and you'd like more of it, I offer you the opportunity to subscribe and to become part of our viewing audience, And until we have a chance to come together again, thank you once again for this episode of The Inside Scoop with Mr. Mike. Mike, thank you, sir. And to everyone.
Thank you, Eduardo. And thanks to everybody for listening. Appreciate it.
Outstanding. Thank you all, and bye for now.
For more exclusive leadership insights, be sure to subscribe to The Inside Scoop on YouTube and Spotify. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit that share button and spread the word. See you next time on The Inside Scoop.